Welcome to Decentralized News. This is our weekly news roundup where we cover the stories affecting the cryptocurrency space. I'm your host, Peter DeVries, joined as always by Ozzy. We have exciting news to get right into. Nothing we say is financial advice. Please do your own research. Happy Easter, everybody. Happy Easter, Ozzy. Did you have a nice Sunday?
Yes, I had a great Easter. How was your Easter?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, I saw Super Mario Brothers with my son. It was awesome. It wasn't awesome, but anyway, it was all good. There's a fun little Easter egg themed story we can start off with. The Mac OS, since 2019, has the Bitcoin white paper hidden in its files. Did you see this story?
Yeah, I've been seeing it and I've been seeing it all over Twitter. I mean, it's such an interesting Easter egg to finally be discovered now as Bitcoin becomes more popular and more interesting, and it raises some pretty interesting questions too.
Oh, like what?
Is Steve Jobs Satoshi Nakamoto? There's a couple of kind of interesting overlaps with Steve Jobs and Satoshi Nakamoto. Primarily, Satoshi disappeared in about April 2013. Steve Jobs passed away in October of 2013. So, although there's about a 6 month difference in when he disappeared and when he passed away, that's a pretty close proximity. And so, both working in the computer science space and big innovation space makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I also heard he was pretty heavily influenced by Japanese culture personally. He collected some art and into Buddhism and things like that. That seems to be a little bit well documented.
Yeah, it's something that needs a lot of like financial to do, and he would be someone that would have such a huge availability of resources, having been the head of Apple and being the head of Apple at the time. So that would make quite a bit of sense. And
Well,
what's
maybe there's
even more
maybe
interesting,
there's more maybe there's more Easter eggs to be found. So like the Easter egg that was in the Genesis block wasn't found for I think 9 years or 10 years. I think I read that. And then this Bitcoin white paper that was put in the operating software that was just found is 2018. So someone put it in there after Steve Jobs passed away, but maybe there's evidence within the company or something like that. Like somebody there knows or is supporting it somehow. Or maybe there's more Easter eggs to be found, basically.
yeah, exactly. There's probably there's probably more Easter eggs, especially if it's been included. It feels like this was almost like a planned press thing that everyone's found it all of a sudden. It's been there since 2019. What if there's more that Steve Jobs was hiding that no one knew about?
And there's the whole theory that it's more than one person. Maybe he was just part of the conspiracy.
Yeah, what if he was just part of it? Maybe he was part of a network of people that were doing it. Because one of the probably the biggest points against Steve Jobs being Satoshi Nakamoto is that he would have been so busy with Apple projects, iPhone and iPad events in the early days of Bitcoin that he wouldn't have had enough time to be running and developing Bitcoin at the same time. But
Yeah. It sounds hard to me, but I'm not the genius that he was.
yeah,
But speaking of geniuses, Elon Musk has also been in the news lately, moving Dogecoin around. He put the symbol up and then took it down all within the last week.
yeah, Twitter was for about a week's time Dogecoin or Doge Twitter. I heard different people calling it different things. And yeah, pumped about 30%. We talked about that briefly on the show. But then it slowly pulled back and dipped just over 6.5% after they removed the logo. So yeah, no, a little bit of price manipulation potentially by Elon Musk there.
Well, that's what's interesting about it is at the same time, he's asking a judge to throw out a huge lawsuit that's against him for manipulating the price of Dogecoin. And he's doing something like this at the same time. It's like an epic troll sort of way. It's throw out the case and because what I'm doing is nothing and then just do it again.
Yeah, the thing is that he hasn't really done anything. He doesn't control Doge. He doesn't pump Doge when he posts a Doge picture. It's not him buying Doge. It's other people buying Doge because he tweeted about it. So it's hard to blame him because people decide that they want to listen and do things with Doge price when he tweets about it or when he makes a tweet. It's just if BitBoy tweets about XRP and XRP's price bumps because whatever, it's not really, he's just an influencer. Doesn't really mean.
When he first did that, like the question that came to my mind was, can it be proven that he sold because of this price move? And would that be?
That would be the only question that I would have. Yeah, is he selling Doge on the pumps? If he is selling Doge on the pumps, then absolutely. He knows what he's doing. He's taking advantage of it financially to do it.
Like he's pumping Doge and then using the money to buy Twitter or buy CNN or something.
Exactly.
Crazy.
But that's not, if he's not selling, he's just posting a tweet about Doge and people are pumping up the price and then it's dropping. That's not his fault. It's like saying I can't tweet about whatever project or whatever token to whatever number of followers I have because it might pump the price or it will pump the price because my followers do everything I say. Quote unquote, I'm being sarcastic here, guys.
Anyway, all right, well, let's move on into the macro news. It's got a big week coming up ahead and also some news that came out at the end of last week in terms of the unemployment numbers.
Yeah, we'll start with what the numbers were last week and then kind of look at the coming numbers this week to lead us down the road of what are interest rates going to be, that fun conversation we have every other week, and as we get ready for good old Jerome Powell. So the JOLTS report, which is the job openings and labor turnover summary. It's a report that's released every month. And the big kind of headline is that job openings fell about 6%. They were predicted to fall, but they fell more than expected. Numbers had previously been forecasted to fall around 10.4 million. They're now about 9.93 million, so just under 10 million, which is exactly what the Fed wants. The Fed wants job openings to come down. There's too many openings for the number of people looking for work. Basically giving chance for price and wage inflation spiral. And so this is great news. But the big kind of downside is that we're still seeing a lot of people kind of quit jobs, change jobs. Even though it's lower than expected, we're still seeing the numbers still need to come down.
So how's that affecting interest rate expectations? Like that number seems to be moving a lot. Are they going to raise it at 25 bips or what are they doing?
It's pumped the expectations for CME for what the interest rates might be, with at the time over 75% of people predicting a 25 basis point. It shifted down a little bit this morning to about 66%. A little bit of change, but even more interestingly is that at one point about as high as about 3% of people were expecting a hike of another quarter basis in June, when if we think just over a month ago or a month and a half ago, people were expecting June or July to start seeing interest rate pullbacks. So numbers are starting to tilt to an even higher terminal rate. Farther back expectations, we're still seeing expectations that there could be a pullback in July, though, which is a bit ridiculous in my opinion. Market's still overly optimistic, but maybe we'll be wrong. We got two huge numbers coming out this week that we should really be looking at. The first one is CPI, which is coming out on Wednesday. So we're hoping that CPI comes in below 0.4 and core CPI below 0.5, with year-over-year CPI below 6%. So I know I just threw a lot of big numbers at you, but essentially we're hoping that CPI comes down from last month's numbers. We need
Yeah,
them to
or
come...
CPI beating expectations could lower the chances that the terminal rate keeps going higher, like the
Oh,
CPI numbers start to react.
if the CPI numbers start to react and start getting closer and closer to about a 4.1 year over year increase. So why 4.1? That's the 2023 expectation for inflation set it forth by the Fed in their last meeting. We'll see what the meeting minutes say, which come out on Friday, but that was the expectation. So if we can trend towards that rate, it will lower the chances that we do see another rate hike that some are starting to price in June. So that would be quite incredible to see that change. And so hopefully those numbers come in below expectations, above expectations, and we're looking at seeing a huge jump in rate hike expectations potentially. I hope the market starts seeing and thinking about rate hikes in July, even September, if inflation is still not under control. The other important numbers we're getting is PPI, which comes out on Thursday. This week is a huge week for data, and PPI came in at about 0.2 last month for core and negative 0.1 for total. And so we're hoping to see that number continue to tick downwards. PPI year over year was 4.6. We're hoping to see that come down towards 4.4, 4.2, with core looking more towards 4.2, 4.0. So if we can keep seeing those numbers come down, that is exactly what we want. We got to keep watching. We're not out of the woods yet. May will be important, but these data points and what they suggest are going to be even more important.
And there's also on Thursday the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Sometimes there's some revelations in there that move the markets, another thing to keep an eye out for. And then on Friday, this is early Monday morning, but there hasn't seemed to be as much fervor to the banking crisis lately. I don't know if it's just a quiet weekend because of Easter, but large banks' earnings are coming out on Friday from the likes of JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup.
Yeah, that is exactly right. I mistakenly said that we were going to see meeting minutes on Friday, but it's Thursday because we get the big bank stuff on Friday. And that's just, it's a bit of a recipe for disaster this week. This week will be a really hard week to trade because depending on how these numbers come out, we could be in deep trouble because the market is still not listening to the Fed and still not believing the Fed that they won't cut rates this year. Important to see what happens. We've also got several speeches from different Fed heads this week, including 3 on Tuesday alone. So we're really not looking for a favorable week in the market unless all the speeches are very bullish, but
it's hard to imagine that. They've been holding the line with their rhetoric.
Exactly. They've been holding the line, and we're seeing the market's still not listening to the Fed. Market's still predicting lower rates this year, and it's the opposite of what the Fed is saying. So until the market can get it through their head, we're in for some pain.
Well, turning to kind of regulation, or U.S. Treasury issued a report on DeFi. It was titled The Illicit Finance Risk Assessment of Decentralized Finance. This risk assessment was to explore how illicit actors are abusing what is commonly referred to as decentralized finance. I thought it was interesting to note that as part of the executive summary, they said there's currently no generally accepted definition for DeFi, even among industry participants, or what characteristics would make up a product, service, that's considered decentralized. DeFi services often have a controlling organization that provides a measure of centralized administration and governance. I found that to be pretty accurate, pretty interesting take on it.
Yeah, that's a very accurate assessment, even though most people in DeFi would not want to admit it, really. There is a sense, usually some form of centralization or governing body until they get to a certain size. Trader Joe and the bigger dexes and bigger softwares start getting more and more decentralized, but they definitely start off centralized.
But as far as what they were getting, at least the way I read it, it was basically arguing like, how can we use the United States anti-money laundering and counterfeiting the financing of terrorism, the AML, CFTC, and the Bank Secrecy Act to better enforce DeFi. But it just seems like they're trying to figure out how to use the laws they have or what they need to enhance in order to regulate it.
Yeah, I think they're probably, the laws are too outdated or are not full enough to really handle the existing structures of DeFi, and it would take a lot for DeFi to be able to reach that point. I hate the fact that they use illicit finance. That's probably like the biggest indicator from that report.
Bank Secrecy Act, when you start talking about the Bank Secrecy Act, I can't spit it out. When you're talking about like national security issues, and they can use just the harshest of laws to regulate it. That's what I hear when I hear those.
Yeah.
But the Cato Institute kind of comment on this, and this is more in terms of CBDC, but they did bring up this act. But the Cato Institute put out a report. It was a policy analysis released on April that warns that a central bank digital currency could be detrimental to the American people. Some of the big quotes: laws designed, like some of the laws we were just talking about, for counterterrorism, to deter money laundering and collect taxes, largely provide the government with the ability to conduct unchecked surveillance over financial information. A CBDC would provide countless opportunities for the government to control citizens' financial transactions. Such controls could be preemptive, prohibiting and limiting purchases, could be behavioral, spurring or curbing purchases, or they could be punitive, freezing or seizing of funds. And the authors even made recommendations that the U.S. Congress would have to get involved to explicitly prohibit the U.S. Treasury and central bank from issuing digital currency in any form. And they get specific about it. They could amend Section 13 of the Federal Reserve Act by limiting the U.S. Treasury's authority to expand existing offerings. But I thought this was an interesting take on CBDCs.
It's one of multiple interesting takes that we're seeing on CBDCs. Robert Kennedy Jr., who's a presidential candidate, has also called BDCs a detriment to the U.S. and followed a lot of the similar lines as the Cato Institute. So we're seeing a lot of politicians, at least that are not within the main fold, speak out against CBDCs. And I think what they're talking about at the Cato Institute, at least at a high level, aligns feelings of many in cryptocurrency.
Yeah, even with these potential problems of a CBDC, it's hard to imagine it not coming to fruition. The Cato Institute also calls for auditing of the Fed, and that's not happening.
Yeah, it's hard to see where the winning ground will be unless the American people vote for someone who's not going to allow the Fed to pass the CBDC.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It's really hard for me to imagine it not happening.
Yeah, with that said, let's look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin's been stuck in a range for the last 23 days, so it's not moving
Not
much.
a CBDC.
But it's not a CBDC, and that's a great thing. With that said, we've got Bitcoin repayments from Mt. Gox estimated to begin. Some people are wondering if that's going to affect the price.
There's been an up. Yeah, go for it.
Creditors had up until April 6th to submit their repayment information, either the base repayment, interim repayment, or early lump sum repayment, and they're scheduled to start in October 2023, late October 2023. There's two big creditors, which are Bitcoinica, which is a New Zealand-based cryptocurrency exchange, and Mt. Gox investment funds, which have opted to have their funds paid out in Bitcoin, which is 20% of all claims. So some interesting facts there. What do you
Yeah, which
think?
means they're not going to have to liquidate to pay off on that 20% of the claim. So there's 141,000 Bitcoins that are going to be released. There's these 3 different ways. One of them is actually wait. They're going to get a 90% payout on their 141,000 Bitcoins. One of them is they could wait until all the settlements are done, but it could take years and years more, and they could potentially get 10% more, but they could get less. So a lot of people are taking one of the other 2 options, but one of them would require them to liquidate in order to pay it off, and the other one would be these people taking in Bitcoin. So the fact that 20%, 2 of the biggest ones already, are known to taking into Bitcoin is a good sign. So
Yeah.
there won't be a huge effect on the market, because there was 2 big known sales. There was like this one and the U.S. government having 40, or they're going to be selling a bunch of Bitcoins too over the course of the next year, going up to the halving. So it's good to know this one may not be too detrimental or have too big of an impact.
Yeah, that's the hope. Hopefully we can see everything move in the right direction, and maybe the price, we don't see a huge dump from everything. And I'm that's my hope, that's my thought. I don't think we're going to see a huge dump. So
It'll be a nice close of a major chapter when it's all done, though.
oh, absolutely. Really got to say, I can't wait to see this chapter close for everybody, for crypto as a whole, because it's just this bane that has been sticking around for 10 years almost now.
Yeah, I was reading one article. It stated it was still bigger than the FTX collapse. It was like 815,000 Bitcoin or something like that. But I don't know. The FTX collapse is like 9 billion, but maybe it's not all settled what the numbers are. But I was blown away by that. I was like, oh man, this was way back.
It was huge.
Yeah, it was a big bust. But moving on into Russia crypto mining capacity, second now only to the United States. Their total capacity involved in Bitcoin mining has reached 1 gigawatt. By contrast, the U.S. has 3 to 4 gigawatts. They passed a small country. I'm going to foul the name, but I think it's Kazakhstan. And they kind of came onto the scene, but now they've had some power issues in the country, and regulators are coming after them a little bit. Whereas it's a bit opposite in Russia. They seem to have some pro crypto mining regulation in the works.
Yeah, it follows the discussion from the Space Force engineer that kind of talked about last week, the need to promote mining in the US to make sure we basically secure block space. And we're seeing Russia slowly climb up and start potentially competing for that block space. They're still a third to a quarter of the size of the US, but they're climbing, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we see something coming out of China in the not distant future. We're seeing Bitcoin mining difficulty really rise alongside the hash rate, and with the first nuclear powered mine farm mining over $6.49 million worth of Bitcoin in a single month. Competition in mining and in block space is growing and growing for Bitcoin, and is a good and a bad thing when we look to the future of Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk of environmental, which is the environmental story being a big part of the future, and this is an angle of attack on Bitcoin that just doesn't seem like it's going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, the talk about nuclear power is a good one for cryptocurrency, because moving away from non-renewable energy sources is exactly what needs and what Bitcoin needs to basically make that argument disappear. So that's super important as we look in towards a more renewable energy based future. We're seeing some pretty interesting news overall, and it's just, who knows? We have seen some other great news, though, is that the right to mine Bitcoin is being protected in more and more states in the US, with Arkansas stepping up to pass a pro Bitcoin and crypto mining bill. We've also seen a bill out of Texas that is looking to take away some incentives from Bitcoin miners in the state, but they are still protecting Bitcoin mining rights as a whole. So I talked about this before, but I think taking away those incentives is potentially an incentive for them to develop their own energy sources so that they contribute to the stability of the Texas grid. And so I think that is potentially how we might see that move towards sustainability grow in Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, there was like a big hit piece. It was the New York Times or New York Post over the weekend on Bitcoin mining. And just their ability to paint the picture that it's bad for the environment. I could just see that it's just not going away. It's not going to go anywhere for a little while.
Exactly. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a battle, but it will happen. It will happen slowly but surely. With that, we've got some cool adoption stories. MicroStrategy has added 1,045 Bitcoin to its growing crypto treasury, which is major. They continue to be one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin overall. They've lowered their DCA a little bit.
Speaking of the Bitcoin price and just how flat it's been, remember when there's been bad news, and then there's news like this? Remember when this kind of story would pump the market big time?
Yeah. The market's become a little bit immune. At the same time, Snoop Dogg had this blinged out crypto hardware wallet at WrestleMania 39. Did you see that? Have you seen the pictures of it?
Yeah, he's such a Chad.
Yeah.
When it comes to crypto and NFTs and stuff. Yeah, that was awesome.
Fun little exposure.
When I was looking in the story, I'm not really into the scene too much, but there's other big name people also sporting that kind of stuff. Drake shared an image of his diamond encrusted Ledger Nano on Instagram. Sergio Kitchens, known as Gunna, wore a custom Ledger hardware wallet at the Meta Gala event in 2021. So
I guess people are making moves.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Also don't know how many people outside of the cryptocurrency space would realize what it is, but
there's did you see the new Ledger that's coming out?
I've looked at it a little bit, but I haven't spent too much time.
Ledger Stacks or something like that?
Yeah, I saw that. I haven't looked enough at it though.
It's interesting in terms of a device that will propel the whole industry forward, just in between a wallet and a phone, you know?
Yeah.
Because the phone doesn't seem to be where people trust to have their wallets.
No.
But people do trust Ledger. There's a huge amount of the overall market is deposited into ledgers. So they have like a chance coming out with a product like this. I don't know. It was an interesting idea to me. Just kind of something in between a phone and a ledger, as opposed made by the crypto wallet company, as opposed to the phone company. I hadn't really thought about that too much. Sounds like a cool idea to me.
Yeah, last little bit before we move into some chain and DeFi news. Kevin O'Leary backed Wonder Finance has acquired Coinberry. They're basically, we're starting to see consolidation amongst Canadian exchanges to bring towards a bigger, more centralized cryptocurrency exchange in Canada. We've recently had several exchanges walk out of Canada, and this is a move to ensure that there is still access within the country. Kevin O'Leary was also a big backer of FTX, so this is an interesting thing. People were claiming his innocence and not being knowledgeable, but he obviously seems to believe in the cryptocurrency space because he's backing this other exchange that's based out of Vancouver. Speaking of exchanges, though, peer-to-peer Bitcoin exchange Paxful suspends their marketplace. You got more on that?
Paxful was one of the world's largest peer-to-peer cryptocurrency exchanges. CEO Ray Yosef cited key staff departures and regulatory challenges for the industry as a reason behind the decision. So more regulatory FUD. They had a bit of a reputation. I saw some interesting stories researching this about some of their actions, some of the accusations against them. They sounded TX-ish. Maybe not so much on how they were operating the business, but just how they were acting personally. It sounded a little unprofessional. I don't really want to go too much into the details.
Fair enough. Yeah, regulatory uncertainty is definitely a big thing to consider in the US still. Even more interesting, we're seeing Polygon become the second largest gaming blockchain with surging user activity in March. Have you looked at this at all? Polygon has been a big play for us for a while.
Apparently, a significant amount of the increase was due to a specific game called Hunters on Chain by Boomland. It's a free-to-play role-playing game with NFT integrations and has a similar look and style to Minecraft. I'm intrigued. I do want to research it a little bit. I want to check it out now. They've also been building a long list of big name partnerships such as Warner Music, Starbucks, I'm well aware of, Adidas, Reddit, Adobe to develop and host NFT projects. And this comes right on the heels of also their recently launched open source Ethereum virtual machine equivalent zero knowledge rollup that came out on March 27th. So Polygon making moves.
Yeah. They've been a little bit quiet for the last few weeks. We hadn't had a big headline to announce for them in a little while, and this is now two kind of back to back with their zero knowledge roll up, and then this big surge in gaming activity. So
yeah, the game that kind of came out of nowhere, but it's like the whole killer app. I'm just intrigued because I haven't really personally played like a really fun blockchain game or one that I particularly like, but I'm interested to check it out. I know Minecraft having a young one.
Yeah, I still play Minecraft sometimes, so
I wonder if it's playable. That's what I'm mostly curious about.
Yeah.
Is it actually fun?
That's it.
But Binance is also in the news. Binance Australia's derivative license canceled. This is by request of Binance. And they only had 104 users, and they're still going to be doing their spot, just not derivatives. But this does come after the CFT lawsuit last week in the US for offering unregistered derivatives. So I don't know if they're just strategically withdrawing a little bit over here. But Binance also, I remember they had that kind of fake red letter notice.
Yeah.
So that day, even though that turned out to be false, it did come out that they're being sued. Binance and Miami Heat's Jimmy Butler were hit with a $1 billion lawsuit in Florida. Did you see that?
I saw that.
Yeah, there was still some bad news. They're just under heat all the time, man. He's flashing that 4 all day, it seems like, every day.
Yeah, exactly. For this one, it's for using kind of sales tactics that maybe weren't maybe the most kosher, most forthright. Basically, Jimmy Butler for shilling cryptocurrency, but Binance is listed as part of it because of potential partnership there.
I didn't see any of this particular shilling. I missed out on that. What was Jimmy Butler actually saying or shilling?
Yeah. So
really curious, I guess.
It's hard to say, but apparently they were doing traditional ads on television and social media with Jimmy Butler as one of their brand ambassadors, but it's like Matt Damon with Crypto.com. I don't know. It feels like this lawsuit has no legs, at least based on what's being listed there, but who knows?
It has legs in the sense that there's a lawyer who thinks he can win a case, and there's a company like Binance that has an awful lot of revenue, and they're under a lot of fire, so maybe they can get a win against them.
Or just get it settled for a much smaller amount than the $1 billion that they're asking for. With that, we're seeing some concerns about decentralization. We talked about it earlier in the show, and DYDX, one of the big decentralized options platforms, went down after an AWS outage, which is raising some concerns about its decentralization. They're kind of had to halt operations, and although they're one of the bigger, basically decentralized DEXs, they're
the 11th largest DEX, something like that.
Yeah, an Amazon Web Services outage basically forced it to halt operations. DYDX has acknowledged its reliance on the centralized web service, and that's it's problematic, but it's also pledged to move to more decentralized operations, but it hasn't stated how. We also saw
Like
Binance
a
US and
desire.
Coinbase suffer outages because of the AWS issue, but for something that's
I've heard
supposed to be
this.
better than Binance US or Coinbase, it's still not really decentralized.
Yeah, so Amazon Web Service, one of the most widely used cloud services in the world, and a considerable number of decentralized infrastructures use it. I've heard this argument against used by Maxis against Ethereum that it's a couple of servers get shut down and the whole system's down. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard that argument used before.
Yeah, I don't think it's as big because I think there's still some spread across cloud, Google Cloud services and other services. But yeah, there is a heavy reliance on these data centers and these like AWS. So something to
It's like
consider in the decentralized space. Maybe how do we incentivize more decentralization and running of hardware?
I think there's some motivation to get more decentralized and truly decentralized, but the facts remain. It's there. A lot of them are dinos, decentralized in name only. So how do we
Yeah,
get there?
that's the case with our next story, Sushi Swap, which has been subject to a SEC subpoena for potentially not being decentralized enough, has now been hacked. Their head chef, who is subject of that subpoena, said to revoke all chains on Sushi Swap because of a hack that involves an approved related bug on the router processor 2 contract. PeckShield has also recommended revoking on all chains, and right now the hack is relatively small, affecting about 190 Ethereum addresses which had approved the problematic contract, but there was also about 2,000 addresses on the layer 2 Arbitrum that approved the bad contract. So something to watch. Only 3.3 million, so that's a pretty small hack in terms of total DeFi hacks, but still something that's big and noteworthy for cryptocurrency as a whole. With that, I want to thank everybody for listening to Decentralized News. We're posting to YouTube first, so please consider subscribing to catch our videos as soon as they drop. Our goal is to provide unfiltered content that will help foster genuine discussion to help the entire space grow. So please remember, this is not financial advice and we are not financial advisors. This show was presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research before making any investment decisions. Thank you for your support and stay tuned for the next episode.